Ranger is that there's a lot of different art mediums and really a lot of different delivery systems for a product. That's what it's all about. Something can start out as an ink pad, and it can turn into things from paints to markers to crayons, and in this case, a spray. So I'll also talk about the distressed oxide pads. I think one of the questions people have is what makes these sprays, these cool little oxide sprays, different than an ink pad? Well, the gist of it, the basics of it is the same. It is a dye pigment fusion. This is delivered in an ink pad, this is delivered in a spray bottle, but from a chemist's point of view, it's more complicated than that. You have to totally change the formulation for an ink to be delivered in a piece of felt versus something that you can spray. The result, though, is very, very cool. So I'm just going to take some paper, and you can work on really anything porous when it comes to working with distress. Everything from watercolor cardstock to mixed media heavy stock to kind of any kind of paper. You want to avoid plastics like UPO, right? UPO won't really work well with these kind of inks. They'll do their thing and then they'll wipe clean, but let's just take this down from an ink pad, right? So an ink pad is just going to give us that smush, that kind of basic thing, or we can also go in and blend, whether it's with a blending tool or a blending brush. We can get kind of that soft, creamy look. And the thing about these inks is because it is a dye and pigment fusion, we get this really rich coloration, right? But the thing about working with an ink pad also is that we have the ability to stamp. So you can take any of your images, you can put it on your ink pad, and you can stamp those crisp lines with an ink pad. You can't get that with something fluid, right? It's just going to be too liquid and just kind of too playful, if you will. If you have paper covered in oxide and you spray it, we're going to get some reaction. The thing about this is that this is going to start to oxidize as soon as it gets wet. We're going to see those water drops start to form, and that's because right now that dye and pigment is starting to separate. We can see those little outlines. Can you see those little outlines around each dot? That's that dye and pigment separating. And then, of course, if we dry it, you'll really start seeing that oxidation occur. It kind of gets that light effect, if you will. And the thing about oxide is the more water you add, the more it will oxidize. So that's the gist of an ink pad, but when we deliver it in a spray bottle, my God, totally different, and you'll see the difference. That's why I like to demo it that way. A couple of things to note with a spray. These guys need to be shaken up. If you see the kind of the side of the bottle, I'll show where the label connects, where they don't want you to see. They did their best to wrap it, but I think it's important. You know, they're like, this part is ugly, don't show them. I'm like, you need to see it. You can see down here, here is that pigment, and all the way up there is dye. So before you use this, you have to mix it up. You have to shake it. Now with the spray bottle, because it's got that opening, you know, we kind of say shake side to side just so you can swirl it. It's not because it's going to foam. It's not because it's going to do anything wrong. It's just because if you shake it up and down, some of that ink could leak out the neck of the bottle. I don't have time for that. So.
That's because the mica will go into the...
No, because this isn't mica.
Oh, it's not.
No. Oh, wow, those are beautiful. Yeah, they're beautiful. It's the first time I've seen them. We won't talk about that. We're talking about offset sprays right now. See? Totally wants to... Yeah,
it just kind of leaks out when you're shaking it. Ask me how I know.
Yeah, I know. I tried to warn you.
You did.
I did. So what's really important, you can take a paper towel, some sort of cloth, that's the way I like to do it, and just cover the nozzle, and then you can just shake it out, right? Because this way, if any ink is going to go out, it's just going to get caught in the towel. These haven't been used yet, so I should be okay. But once I kind of prime the pump, that's when you have to worry about it. But you can see that they mix up really, really quick, right? You don't have to wait till all of that stuff is mixed in. It has a mixing ball. As long as you hear that shake around, you're ready to go. And every time you use it, it is a good idea just to give it a little shake. So once they're like mixed up, let's say you're working on a project and you shake them and you go from color to color, I would just do this. That's enough to kind of make sure that that dye and pigment is really floating around. That's what it's all about. So it's not so much a clogging issue. It's just the fact that when it comes to oxide, the beauty is that dye and pigment. So if you don't keep it mixed, you're going to end up getting either pigment or just dye. Make sense? All right, so let's talk about how it looks on a surface. Now I'm just going to work here on a media mat. Let me kind of clear that area. So I'm just going to go in and spray it, and you can see right away it's got beautiful coverage, beautiful opacity, almost like a spray paint. And when you layer a color on a color, so you can see Cracked Pistachio over Mermaid Lagoon, you can see that that green sits right on top of that blue. If these were just translucent dyes like our spray stain, we wouldn't see that color separation. We would have seen a new color, which would have been pretty. But the cool thing about working with a pigment spray now is that when we layer colors, you actually see that they're layered. You don't necessarily need to dry them in between, but you can, depending on what you're going for. So here I'm just going to dry this, just so you can see the spray as it is, because it's still going to be reactive with water. After all, it is an oxide. But just because it's reactive with water doesn't mean you always have to use it with water. That's the thing about distress also. So you can see it gives it, I'm going to say kind of a chalky appearance, but it's really just that kind of oxidation. We don't have that reaction yet because we haven't added water, but you can see where we've sprayed it, how we have that different color blend, right? But when we add water, we're still going to get that magic. We're going to get everything that these do, but now we get to choose how we want that to happen and when. Now when we add big drips of water, you're going to see that dye and pigment separate even more than this, because the intensity of a spray, that's really why a lot of mixed media artists love spray. It gives it more intensity, more coverage, quicker, right? If we had to cover an entire journal page by using an ink pad and a blending tool, that's going to take a while. But because I can just spray this on now, we get a much more fluid nature of our color inks too. Just look at the difference side by side as far as that creamy blend, but also kind of that fluid nature. So is there an either or? No, and I think sometimes when we release new art mediums, people go, oh, I can have this instead of this. It's like, no, we never want to give you a product so you have this instead of this. We want to give you a product that says, here's another way to apply or deliver that medium, right? Now the thing about this stuff, of course, because it is a dye and pigment, it's a little bit messier to clean up. So you want to work on a media mat, a craft sheet, you can work with a splat box, you can clean that up. But the nice thing also is that we can also mix our mediums. That's what I'm going to share with you as well. It's always very cool when we have different products. Let's take some other colors. Oh, we'll take this, we'll take this. We can mix dyes, these are spray stains, with pigment and dye, which are oxide sprays, and we'll get something completely different. So this guy, now that I've already shaken it up officially, I can now just give it a little mix, and I can spray some of that color. Then I can go in with the spray stain. Now the spray stain, remember, this is just going to be just full-on dye. And I'm just going to go in, because I've added dye and some pigment, and I can create a totally different background, right? So remember, this was a really bright color, but because I mixed it with a dye, it's completely altering my background. Now let me dry it, because that's when you see what's going on, what's happening here. Trying to get out of camera here. It's tough to work. All right, now as I'm drying stuff, the thing about working with different fluid inks is you're always going to have what I call the sludge factor, right? You're going to have that on there. If it looks like sludge, it dries like sludge. So if you don't want it there, just tap that with something porous, and the color will just fill in the blanks. So here's what you're going to see happens when this dries. You're going to see that where I have that concentration of oxide, it's oxidizing, and where I just have the dye, it is translucent. Right?
It's turning blue again too, kind of.
Because pigment always dominates dye. So it doesn't matter what you put on top of it, even if this dried and I put another layer of ink, that pigment is always going to rise to the top. Pigment dominates dye at all times. Well, yeah, I'm a 5-year-old there. I'm like, why? Why is this happening? Tell me why. Now, if I did this, what about this? But now I'm just one of those doers. I just do it and I try to figure it out myself. But having different mediums, and I think that's what's so exciting about educating people on inks, is that you think that you just need one thing and you're going to be good, but when you start playing around with what you already have, even if we went in and added a significant amount of water up here, we can get more of that color to go right down over that dye, and we can still get that dye to react. It's distress after all. That's the beauty of distress. Distress gets better with water. Most water-based inks, if you add a significant amount of water, your color starts to dissipate, right? Like a watercolor, right? We know if we want a lighter color, we just keep adding more water. Well, with distress, if you keep adding more water, you're going to get more color, right? Which is cool, because that's what I like about doing backgrounds. I like the fact that I don't have to use tons and tons of ink to get a beautiful background. I can play around simply by adding layers of water. But you can see that these sprays are just, they are ridiculous. So let's talk about some effects without you kind of seeing the same thing over and over. I'm just going to leave this here. I'm going to let that air dry just because I'm bored. You know, sometimes I just don't want to wait for it to dry. But I'm just going to show you some things that I showed during Facebook Live. Obviously, oxide sprays are going to allow us to now put ink over darker surfaces, right? So we can spray it on craft paper, black cardstock, whatever, we get that opacity. You can spray a color of oxide, put a stencil down and just start adding water over that stencil, and that area is going to continue to oxidize more than our background. So that's where it builds up that kind of white layer. Do you see that? Remember, every time I add water, it's just going to oxidize more and more. So just water through a stencil over your background is going to get this. But this one of my favorites. My background is all done with ink, right? So all of those translucent colors in the background, those are all done with either spray stain or ink pads, that translucent, rich color. Then I laid a stencil down and sprayed it with an oxide because pigment dominates dye. So now I'm able to put blue on top of red and orange, and it's still blue. It doesn't turn brown, right? Because if this was just all translucent, it would turn a color. So let's talk about when we're working on different types of substrates, okay? Oh my gosh, I got a lot of stuff in here. It's awesome. Okay. So if I have a collaged surface, and we talked about this in class, this is just done with a layer of Collage Medium. If your Collage Medium has cured, when you go to put a product over the top of it, let's just say it's a spray stain or an oxide, the thing you have to remember is that this is supposed to seal that, okay? So it's going to be a creative dry erase board. But I found that if you work with this and you let your Collage Medium dry to the touch, but it's still a little porous, watch what happens. So I'm just going to start a collage from the get-go. It's hard to explain, right? Like, but it has to be dry. Yeah, it's like it has to be dry, but not fully dry. And like, so that to me is the difference between dried and cured. I think that was the best way I could describe it in class. It's like it's dry, but it's not cured. Because if it is cured, if it's overnight, then when I just wet this, that's what Collage Medium is supposed to do. It's just supposed to, I mean, it totally comes off, right? Because it could be used as a sealer. So here's what we're going to do. Let me grab some ephemera. There we go. Paper dolls, ephemera. Yeah.
Don't spend it out.
No, you can't. He's a big guy.
They listened to you, eh?
I know, they did. Which was good. Because it, you know, it takes the fun out of it. If you spend all your time overthinking it, it really does just kind of take the fun out of that. It's giving them something to sit on, because otherwise it'll just be a floater in air, and that's not going to be good. All right, we're going to do some Collage Medium. See where I put that last night. It was nice organizing last night, huh? I did pretty good. These baskets, this last minute decision really worked out well. All right, I'm going to use just matte Collage Medium. I'll go with a small brush because nothing else is going to fit that big. I need a big jar of Collage Medium. Hello. Oh, there is peace in the universe. These are cute, not functional, right? Not everything cute is functional. Let's just, right? It's a good tester. It's a great thing if you have a customer that says, which one do I want to do? It's really great. Or really, if you teach classes, this is a great thing because you can refill it in class. You know, because sometimes if you put this much in front of a student, they just think that's a portion size, right? They're like, that's for one card. Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, here you go. That's all the glue you need for this project. That's all you're going to get, and then you can fill them afterwards. But yeah. But if you can trust yourself, if you can glue responsibly, then, you know, crack into the big one. All right. So for this, when I work on the media mat, anytime I have something gunky or sticky, I like to just work on the craft mat portion of it, right? Because this is just going to peel up and allow me to clean it up much, much easier. But if you get something on your glass, you could, there's nothing wrong with going in and using alcohol or hand sanitizer. So I'm just going to take some Collage Medium, place this down. You get what you get, you don't throw a fit. I would normally use a paper towel, but I don't have one this morning. I'll get one. Put another layer on, see where he needs to go. It's a new brush. I'll probably use that little bristle as one. He's going to sit there. Put some under his feet, perfect. Now we're going to paint on a top layer. Now when you use Collage Medium, I like brush strokes. If you don't like brush strokes, you can go with your fingers and kind of smooth it out. But I like brush strokes, you're going to see. Because that's what brush strokes do. All those little jaggedy bits. All right. You just have that in your bag? That is awesome. Thank you.
Be prepared.
That is cool. That is crazy cool. That's really good. Thank you. Because now I'm going to create my baby wipe for my brush. I don't, you have a baby wipe? No, I'm kidding.
Yes, you do.
Oh my gosh, no. That's fine. Just any kind of moisture will keep your brush from drying out. I'll get one later. All right. Wow. See? That's just, oh, there you go. That's a thing.
We're not.
That's all right. All right, so here I'm just going to spray that with water. Cool thing just to note, if you are a maker or, again, people are intimidated by mixed media, if you clean it up while it's wet, it's seconds. If you let everything dry, that's when you're scraping and eroding and doing all of those things. So water-based mediums, clean them up.
Is that just a bar towel that you use?
Yeah, this is just a flour sack towel that I buy at Walmart because it doesn't have any lint on it. So it's just great. You buy them like in a 4 or 5 pack. Like restaurant towels you can get. Just something people say like a cloth diaper. Anything that's just not going to put lint on your projects. It'll look like a chia pet if you use a terry cloth towel. you know. But maybe that's a new texture. Who knows? So Collage Medium could air dry, right? So just know what I'm showing you has nothing to do with heat. The heat is only speeding up the drying time. Okay? But we can just let this air dry if we want. So if you're working on several, go for it. And it just needs to be dry to the touch. It just needs to be that when you touch it, it's not wet. Okay? But this is not cured, but I can tell that it's completely dry. So let me take this, cut this off. All right, there we go. Instant collage with some bonus brush pieces. Okay, so let's talk about some colors. I know that we use this color. Ice spruce. Yeah, that's a good one. We can use a little brown, but I'll mix it up. I'll use some different colors. We're going to work with some oxides. Yeah, so we're just going to work with oxide sprays, and I'll talk a little bit about it when I go to spray this on. I just want to make sure this is mixed up. Oh, I have a paper towel. Way. So easier with a paper towel, guys, because you just need to spray it, put it around the nozzle, shake it up. There was a little confusion in class yesterday when I said wrap the towel around the top and shake it. Some people actually removed the sprayer to do that.
Oh, I didn't.
No dice. See? Consider that a win. Right. I consider that a win.
I forgot to put the towel on it.
You got some really nice paper towels for collage.
Well, I did say remove the top, but I meant this. Some people meant like unscrew the whole sprayer, put the paper towel, and they just started shaking it. And they're like, this is not keeping it in. I'm like, nope. So now I'll just say the clear top. That's my bad.
The lid.
See? The lid. You know, sometimes people take it a little bit more literal than you expect as a teacher, and that's, wow, thank you. Sometimes you don't know. They were. Hey, listen. I have to say, my students yesterday, they rocked. It was just such an awesome class. It was. Like
We were all attentive, and you didn't go ahead of him either.
No,
we waited.
And it's tough to do that in the morning. Sometimes people, you're not all dialed in. I'm not. Yeah. All right, so when we're working with this, I'm just going to do just oxide sprays just to show you what this is going to do on there. So I'm just going to take some color. I'm just going to add some on there. Now remember when it comes to working with this, that as you go in and add color, one color is going to cover the next. So don't worry when you're adding colors to kind of muck it up a little bit, because you don't know what's going to happen with the layers underneath. All right, so far we've got, well, a lot on there. This really in a perfect environment, going with other paper, right? If you do other classes, it's a good idea to kind of pick this up, set it aside, go in with another piece of cardstock. Maybe you're just going to take a tag. Right. If you want your inks to blend right away on any paper, mist it first. Then when you go and do a drag, it's going to act as a watercolor wash. If you go in with dry paper, it's going to print. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right, so if I went dry paper and did that, it's going to have this harsh line. This is just going to allow me now to create more of a fluid wash of color. And backgrounds are good because, well, they're backgrounds. You never really know what you're going to get. But that's another nice thing that, I really love working on a media mat, because I love the fact that the glass is just completely slick, right? It doesn't have any of that porous nature. So this is really good for gluing and sticky messes and things like that. But when it comes to having inks move, and glass is, in my opinion, it's just the way. Not in white, just because because Tonic does have a white glass mat. So if you want that, you can get it now. Tonic has, it's not a media mat, but it's a glass cutting mat in white. I just found that as much as I work, this is more restful to the eye, and this also, believe it or not, makes your colors pop out more than a white surface, especially when you keep working and working. And if you're doing a lot of detail work and you're staring at this, just to me, I found that it was much more relaxing. So that's why I said, oh, hey, I wanted to go in with black. So now we got this guy. Now this could dry, this could air dry. You could also speed it up. So again, heat is not a factor for the process. But what's happening is you can see that even though we were spraying all of that muck as it starts to soak in, you can see those colors start to kind of do their thing. You can see where there was more green or more blue or more brown. So it's very, very interesting when it comes to working with this. Now our paper here, if we want to get some of that color off, we want to get this off before it dries completely. Okay, because it has collage medium. Because if you don't, this is going to take on some color like our background. Okay, makes sense? So if I want some of this to kind of come off here before I totally dry this, I'm just going to want to wipe some of that off. Okay. Now let's go in.
That's cool, so you don't have to mask the image and go to all that effort.
No, but that is because we use Collage Medium, right? So once Collage Medium is over something, it does technically seal it. But this one is different than this one because this was days ago. This, we just did it right now. So as this ink dries, whether it dries by air or heat, you're going to see that there's going to be some separation. Not full, but some separation that goes under the mediums, which I really love. Because this creates just, I think, such a cool background. So now I'm just going to go in with a towel. I'm just going to start to reveal some of the stuff under there. Okay? And you see that as I lift this, a lot of that dye is actually under the surface. So really all I'm wiping off is kind of that oxidized layer, and all that color under there is the dye that's separating in the spray. Now the nice thing about working with this is you don't have to just settle, right? We can go in and we can add different types of colorants if we wanted to add, let's just take a little purple. Hey, it doesn't want purple and green. Okay? We can add some ink in there. And that ink is going to mix in with some of that oxide. It's not going to quite oxidize, but it is going to allow us to add that tone, that tint. And the reason we're able to work with this layer is because our collage medium is not cured. So it's kind of, like you said, it's that in-between. It's the fact that I don't have to mask anything, but I'm still getting that playtime of putting color on and lifting color off before it all absorbs. Because if this didn't have collage medium and you were spraying all of those inks, it would look like paintball. Wherever you sprayed, like, it would just go right into the paper, right? It wouldn't give us that playtime. So it's just something that I discovered, actually. It wasn't something, I can't say that I designed it that way, because I didn't. It was just when I was working with the sprays, I knew that, you know, when you put it on paper, it goes in there. But over a collage, I wanted a little bit more movement. And I'm really pleased at just kind of that overall effect. And it's still going to be reactive with water, so we can still go in and add some of that water. You'll see it break apart a little bit more. But the more color you add over the top of it, the more it's going to stain through that paper. This is a cool background. I love that. Because what I like about oxide sprays as well is it does provide a little bit more softness, if you will, right? Because let's face it, when you have dyes, that'd be this one, the background of this one is dye with a little bit of oxide spray, completely different effect. So, kind of have to play around.
And the water doesn't bring the collage medium down, like it's still sticky then, so it doesn't fall, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, because it's a water-based, waterproof. So once it was dry to the touch, water can't clean it off.
Make it
No,
fall off.
it's done. Yeah, it's very cool. I love that back. And I would still stamp on that. I could do another collage layer if I wanted to. See, look at that. Look at that. Look at that cleanup. I have not, but I bet it would be really cool.
Well, the distressed inks that work really good, and the oxides work really good.
Yeah, and people are saying alcohol inks are working great on jelly plate. Yeah,
I've seen that.
It's kind of crazy, right? Oops, sorry.
Don't use a stain because it stains.
Yeah, but that could be color too. Cool. All right, so
Frame the jelly plate.
next up, any questions about oxide sprays? I know there's a million and one things that I'll continue to demo throughout the show, but the gist of it, you guys get it, sprayable dye pigment, cool. Because there's a lot of other stuff. Next, we're going to talk about Archival Inks, which really simple. Ranger has had Archival Ink in their line for many, many years. It is their permanent ink. It is an oil-based ink that is designed for stamping. And honestly, as many years as I've designed for them, I've always wanted distressed colors in this archival formulation. Because it's waterproof, it's going to allow me to stamp before or after. It does a lot of very unique things that a traditional ink pad doesn't do. When it's oil-based, it can sit on a variety of surfaces. It can sit on glossy cardstock, it can sit on watercolor cardstock, and they're sold in mini ink pads in sets of 4. You've got warm, cool, and dirty. Okay? I love that vintage set. Now, this dirty set, these are the colors that are in that large 4-cell pad, but if anyone's tried to use that large ink pad, it's not easy unless you have baby little stamps that you're using. So the fact that we have this, really exciting. It does fit in the archival tin. It's similar design to the mini ink pad storage with that little divider on the bottom. But let's show just through the colors. Here all I did, and I would encourage that anyone that runs a blog that wants to show the difference or that has a store, this is Distress ink, and this is Distress in Archival, okay? So Archival is the brand, Distress is the color. So they have a lot of other archivals. Wendy's got colors of Archival, Ranger has color, it's the formulation. But you can see that when I stamped both and sprayed it with water, one was very reactive with water, that would be Distress ink. The other, completely waterproof, that would be Archival, right? So the thing to know about this is that if you want a great stamping ink, you can stamp this over really any substrate. You can stamp it on glossy paper, you can stamp it on the new hardcore panels, that's Archival over the top of it. And it's just a nice, crisp, detailed ink. But you can do some cool stuff with Distress. You're welcome to, if you're taking video, you can fan through the colors, look at it. But this is really a great way when people go, well, what's the difference? It's like, well, here's that color in Distress ink, here's that color in Archival, hit it with water, and one is going to go crazy, and the other one's just going to hang out. Yeah. So let's show on a piece of cardstock. I'm just going to show you coated. Yeah, I'm just going to show on coated, on glossy cardstock, which is pretty awesome. All right, clean this up. Just a little bit of haze on there. My splat box is literally right there, but like most makers, I would have to get it. So I would rather just not, because that's who we are. All right, going to take a piece of alcohol ink cardstock. This is just a glossy paper, it's a coated paper. The reason I like to show this on glossy is a lot of people think that when it comes to glossy cardstock, even though it's called alcohol ink cardstock, you can only use it with alcohol ink. No, it's actually the most porous of any of our papers. Okay, so it's going to grab whatever medium we give it. So let's find a stamp. Oh, I just happen to have this guy, Distinguished.
Oh, somebody's asking on my strip, what's the difference between Distress Archival and regular Archival?
Distress colors. It's only a palette.
Oh.
It's just the palette. It's the only difference. Other than where I put my grid blocks. Ben, where did I put my stamping blocks? Do you know?
Your block?
They're still in the pot.
Oh no, here they are. That's just fine. Well, you never know what you're going to need. You never know what you're going to need. Oh, I'll need that too. I'll take these while I'm in here. All right. Let's move these over here. It doesn't, see, I am like every other maker. It doesn't matter how large of a space you have, you will work in this much. It's the truth. Story of our lives, right? Because you get here, you're like, look at this demo table. Okay, but I'm gonna utilize my media mat as real estate. That's what I always say. Consider this your safe space. Everything off your media mat, because then you have a space to work. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some images and I'll stamp them in some different colors of Distress Archival. When you work with Archival ink, because it is oil-based, you definitely want a cleaner if you are a stamp cleaner. Okay? The only time I clean my stamps is if I'm going to use lift ink. Right? If I need a clean stamp, other than that, just wipe and go. That's it. All right. So let's take a color. I love the fact that it has a nice firm felt, but it's still raised off of the case. You can see that. That you still have a raised ink pad, so that's just going to allow it to hit the high points. We'll just go in. We're going to just do some stamping. Okay. Let me clean my stamp. Okay, that's it. That's clean. All right, now we'll take. I see. I just switched it. And we'll take this guy. This is kind of like that dapper one. See, look at that, Zoe. Look at that, Zoe. Yeah, so see, we can just take a hat. I mean, the cool thing about Distinguished is you have all these different hats and collars, and you could just create some really awesome effects. This one I think I'll go with Vintage Photo. Shocking. No, actually I won't. Don't be predictable. Going with the Little Mermaid Lagoon. Let's go with some peeled paint. And because it's oil-based, you do have a really nice open time when it comes to stamping. It's not going to dry right away on your stamp the way a solvent ink would. So let's just kind of offset this one. Okay. I'm just going to clean this off. Yeah, Distressed colors. Peeled paint, heavenly. Picked raspberry, mermaid lagoon. Ranger used to do that. It sounds good in your head, not a good idea. No, they used to have a whole entire line of vintage ink pads that were scented. Remember those?
Oh yeah.
One was good, multiples, horrible. You know, because like blue was baby powder, and then red was watermelon, and brown was root beer. So imagine all three of those on one card. It was disgusting. It was like a bad Jelly Belly, exactly. So in your head, you're like, oh, it would smell. It's like, oh, it would smell so good. It's like one of them would, yeah. You know, watermelon would be like, ooh, that smells like good watermelon. No, that's fine. All right, so now we're just going to do one other color, and you could just go in and do a lot of different collage elements. I think that's what makes it really fun. This could be the head, right? It is sized to be the head, but again, predictable. Let's see. Any other scripty stuff? Oh yeah, here's it. Let's just take that. We'll take this gear one, and we will use it.
Is that one of your new ones that just came out?
Yes, the new inventor. It's good. I'm just gonna ink this up. I don't know what I'm gonna use of it yet. So sometimes when you have a big background stamp, just don't think that you have to use it as such, right? You can just go in and just use parts and pieces. You fragment it. If it's not on a block, it's just going to allow you, I think, a little bit more creative freedom to use parts and pieces. All right, good. Clean that off. Carefully put it back. Okay.
Can you say hello to Shannon?
Hello, Shannon.
Don't freak out.
Don't freak out, though. Just remain seated for the demo portion. Okay. So once we have some color on the background, there's a couple of things that can happen. If I keep going with archival, right, that's just going to continue to layer it. The nice thing about these colors, as you can see, they're rich, they're vibrant. But when we're working with other ink mediums, where's blending foam? Then
down below.
Really?
Down one more.
Oh,
there they
there
are.
we go. See, as much as I stayed here last night, and I was here last night setting up, you're never ready. All right. I'm just going to take, because I don't, well, let's just see if Ranger did this. Oh, wrong way, but close. They tried. I'll give them A for effort. Yep. So if you take that blending foam and you tuck it under there, that's really, really nice. I'm just going to go in with Distress Ink right now. And I'm going to take that ink and I'm going to start just going over this cardstock. And here's where it's very cool. Archival ink is oil-based. Distress ink is water-based, and oil and water don't mix. So by stamping an ink on, oh, that was nice. Just rip that one off. By stamping that ink on a coated surface, okay, it's working because it's coated. It wouldn't do this on watercolor cardstock, okay? It would still be permanent, but you're not going to get this cool resist factor on watercolor cardstock. By mixing those two mediums, it's quite fun because you can get some really unique effects on your blends. Oh, have it. I'm gonna have to flip all these. All right. Could you go in with a spray? Absolutely. Do you have to blend this? Nope. You could use a distress spray stain. Now, if you used Oxide, Oxide has that pigment in it. And pigment is going to dominate dye. So if you went in with Oxide, you would start covering this. So this is all an ink-to-ink thing. But I like to show this technique because it is quite cool when you're working with colors, especially if you were a fan of brown, as I am. This is really nice because I can take brown Distress ink and go over colors of archival ink. I blame this on every person that ever emailed Ranger that the lids for the minis were too loose. I blame every single one of you. Because I loved them when they first came out and I could just pick it up and they would fall off because, as you can see, I want to use them. And everyone's like, the lids fall off, you need to make them tighter. And now they make them tighter, so now I have to stop, two-hand process.
And it's our fault, huh?
Because the emails and stuff, they're like, Tim, we... Yeah, they're like, Tim, we... they're like, Tim, we have to make it tighter. Everybody wants them tighter. I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So you do get to stop what you're doing. It's like, but now there you go. They're not going to go anywhere. Oh boy. It's the truth. It's the truth. Anyone that has the original set, you know just what I'm talking about. You could pretty much look at that and the lid would fall off. But if it was in the tin, it wasn't going anywhere. Very bitter. Yeah. When will what be available? The archivals, February. Yes, yes.
So the archivals come in February?
Yeah, all of the new come out in February. The new archivals, the oxide spray, and then I'm going to get to alcohol pearls too. Really cool. So I like to show this because as a stamper, you know, sometimes you're just thinking, do I really need a lot of colors? I mean, I'm going to be honest, when I do a lot of mixed media collage, I'm stamping in black or brown, right? I don't really tend to go to a lot of different colors of permanent ink, but if you like to do some cool, funky backgrounds, there is something to be said about having a variety of colors of ink, because you can see just on this background right now, by adding those colors, we're getting this kind of crazy effect. Now, the ink itself was distress. We know about distress that it is reactive with water. So if I just go in and just add just a couple little spritzes of water, I can easily create like a simple washed background, right? My ink, my stamped image is never going to go anywhere. But my distress ink that I've done is. Now the thing about distress ink, the longer it sits there, the more it's going to go through. So let's just say I had a little bit of water there. Let's just say we dried it. It sat there a while. It's really just going to lighten up. Look at that. So when you heat it, that's what's going to go under the surface. Just a simple effect. Completely smooth. I would still use that as a background. I would still stamp a focal image, text, or something in black, right? Because that's just a background. It's random. That's why my images, I wasn't really concerned of where that's going to go. It's still a background that I could put something on the top of. Yeah, I'll pass that over here when it comes in. So that is archival. I mean, really, it's just the same archival ink, but in colors that work great with distress.
The oxide inks in like metallic, like to mix that pigment in.
A metallic pigment is a whole other animal, right? A metallic pigment is a mica, not just a particle. So it never wants to stay suspended. Like the distress mica sprays, these little guys, I mean, you can just see it has a total separation. So we've always talked about metallics. I've talked about metallic inks, and anything that we can do metallic, I have, like a metallic crayon, a metallic paint, no problem. But in an ink pad, especially because I don't like a pigment ink, right? Pigment ink pads are glycerin based. It's thicker. That's why all the metallic inks from all different brands are going to be glycerin based, because it's a thicker medium. But these guys, oil-based, water-based, we can't keep that metallic suspended. It just wants to drop to the bottom. But I never say never. They have chemists. I mean, hello. When I released the Distress Oxide ink pad, the very first thing I said, I'm like, I love this ink pad, is make a really good spray someday. He's like, that's probably never going to happen. I'm like, but it'd be cool if you could figure it out. And that was it. That was that little catalyst of that chemist going, oh, I'll show him. I'll figure it out. Imagine a lot of things in oxide. I'm like, I'd take oxide paint for that matter. I could spray it while it was wet. All right.
That's the visionary, you know?
It's the 5-year-old in me. That's what I always say. They're like, you're never happy. I'm like, yeah. Okay. So I think I want to do one other thing with some inks before I move on to alcohol ink, because once I get into alcohol ink, it's completely different than everything else we've done. There's a couple of other products, especially one that we released last Creativation, that's Resist Spray, that are really going to be fun with oxide and sprays, and I want to share with you what you can do with it. So this is just a sample. I mean, for those that are filming, I'll pass it around so you can, it has to hit the light perfect for you. But this is resist spray through a stencil. This is just going to create that coated resist onto a surface. You can really change up a background with resist spray. So I want to show you a couple of things. Now, when you work with resist spray, I am going to bend down and get the box. You want to use this in a box. You don't want to use it anywhere that you need to clean it off of, because it doesn't want to clean up. Not even off of glass. You'd be scraping it off of glass. And what this is, it's really like a spray glue, I guess I would say. But it's not really a spray glue. It's very sticky when it's wet. I mean, super sticky. But when it dries, it's a great sheen. There's things that I've done on the background. I showed this last year. Like, it's awesome for embossing powder, right? So this is resist spray. And then while it's wet, take my favorite embossing powder, sprinkle it on, and heat emboss it, right? But now I can have embossing powder like in a splatter, right? So I can create snow with white embossing powder. Or what I like about it through a stencil, because you might be thinking, well, I can just do that with a stamp if I wanted that. I love the fact that if I spray through a stencil, I'm still getting that spray pattern that I wouldn't get if I was trying to do this with an embossing ink, right?
Because it would be too.
You just have a hard break, right? So I like using it for embossing powders as well. When I work with it on a background, I would just take any kind of paper that I wanted to, always good to just wreck your first splat box. Oh, nothing better. Yeah. What's that? You just put it in water. So I'm not going to demo a stencil because Mario's not here to fill my bucket of water. But if he was, this. So I have some sort of container that has a little bit of water in it, and anytime I'm going to use resist spray with a stencil, you spray it and you put it right in. Because if it dries on your stencil, it stays on your stencil. It doesn't ruin your stencil though if you think about it. It's just, it makes it bumpy and textural. So that's the only thing. Never stamp with it.
I have a water
And for
bottle
people
with
that have
water.
tried, I just don't recommend stamping with this because it will fuse onto that even when it's wet. I've tried stamping with it going, well, let me just spray a little resist spray and just kind of quickly take my stamp. It got so caked on that rubber even right away, it just ruined my stamp. So I just don't recommend, not every product is stampable, you know, but this is, it's a great spray for that. That's a great question. So, and Mario's here. You're like, you need anything?
I have a water bottle.
Oh, you know what? I have water that they were actually giving me to drink. Oh.
They gave him water to drink.
Now I can use a stencil. I have another one.
You want an extra one?
Thank you,
Hold one to drink.
No, I'm good. But I'll drink this.
Okay. Can I ask, can
Okay,
you
absolutely.
put that in another bottle and add distress stain?
Could you colorize it? You could. Yes, you could. Yeah. The thing about if you put it in a different bottle, especially a mini mister, right? Be careful with a mini mister because its spray apparatus is much finer and it doesn't want to deliver this. Okay. Some other things about sprays, any kind of sprays. If you're a maker, if you're a blogger, if you're a store, replacement spray are key. That's why we do them. Not every sprayer is going to last forever, especially with all these crazy art mediums. We do our best to find the very finest spray nozzle, but sometimes they clog on you. If you soak them in hot water, you can technically get them to clean out eventually, especially if they're in hot water and you spray them underwater. But as a maker, just have replacement sprayers. So if you're in the middle of it and it's clogging, unscrew it, throw it in your water, put on a regular one, go for it, and then you can go back and clean them and replace them. Does that make sense? It doesn't necessarily mean disposable. If you do, thank you. Yeah. It means you're buying a lot of sprayers, and I like that, and that would be me. I'd just as soon chuck it and buy another pack, but that's just me. All right. Now, when it comes to working with a stencil, as Ben asked, what do you do with it? Well, you definitely want to have it off your ring because you want to throw it in the water. So let's do a gradient. Let's do a dotted gradient. So a new one. Just going to take it off this ring, and we'll place this down. So we're just going to place it in the splat box. I'm going to do my best to kind of spray upside down so you guys can see, but I'm not really the best at it. Just make sure I was pointing in the right area. So I'm just spraying it. Now you'll see when it goes on purple, right? Can you see that? So that resist spray is going on kind of a purpley color, so you can see where you spray it, but it dries crystal clear, all right? And you can spray as much as you want on there. When you're done with this, you do want to wipe the nozzle, okay? Again, that's the lazy part of me. I have water there. That's just how I do mine. But you can take a baby wipe, but you have water right there. I just put it in the water and just wipe it off. So makes it easy. It's a good little hack, little trick. It's right there, right? All right. So this, I'm just going to take this off and watch when it goes in the water. You're going to see this weird little cloud. See that? Water-based medium. If you put it in there, it's just going to, that's it. That's all you have to do, okay?
It's milky.
Yeah, it's kind of milky. But if you let it hang out and dry, it's just a textured stencil indefinitely. All right, so now we have this. Now, the spray itself, you have some options with it. You could let it air dry. It's a completely heat-stable medium. Oh no, that's what I have a chair for.
Just don't have it. Yeah.
I don't sit in demo. That's just
Yeah, but you
weird
might
to
decide
me.
that you-
I can't do it. It just doesn't feel right. I stand when I craft, so in my studio I just stand. I'm going too many places. I got too many things going on. So I'm just going to dry this. Now the thing about this is you can see when it's drying, you're still getting that really great shine. I'm trying to kind of hit everyone's camera. But where it's still milky, it's still wet. Okay? Do you have to heat dry? No. And you'll hear me say this in every video that you're filming 100 times because it never fails at Creativation, like you need to heat that. You really don't. I heat everything that I do simply from a time factor. But as a maker, if you're doing multiple things, set that aside to dry, go do something else, come back to that. But in the demo world, we kind of want to see what's going to happen with this. Now, the nice thing about something like this, we're going to do a couple of things. Here, we're going to use the Oxide spray. So I'm going to go back to my little paper towel. Wrap this around. Really shake it up. I have all the clear tops off of mine. Is that a good one? Really good. I have all the clear tops so I can just shake it up. But again, if you're going to shake it, you just probably want to go side to side. That's what it says. But I did that like for the first project I did. I'm
I
like,
think it's just hard for people because they'll just, it's better to tell them just one way for all sprays and that's it.
it's just, I mean, because you don't have to shake a dye. A dye is fluid. It's just this one that, yeah, you'll see. I mean, you saw it. It's just weird. Sometimes it's great, and sometimes it just goes
And
everywhere.
some colors wouldn't come out, but I just
Right.
happened to be the one
It
who
was
came
just
out.
really strange. Yeah. So here I'm going to do some oxide, just to show you oxide over resist. Just a couple of colors there. Okay. And then we're going to do some dye as well. It's always important to play with both.
I love to watch the way he plays. It scares me to do what he does.
Thinking is overrated.
I guess.
It is.
I learned that yesterday in
I think,
class.
yeah, I don't give you time to think in class. Like, I barely give you time to sit down. And then we go. All right, so just gonna add a little bit of water. So let's talk about what's gonna happen on this. The thing to understand about this is that because we sprayed a pigment, even though we have resist spray, it's going to cover it. You could wipe it off later. Oh good, I caught it. I was concerned that I wasn't gonna catch it. Up here where you see the dye, and you see that corner, see those dots start to show through? That's where I did the dye. That's gonna give me the strongest resist. But down here where I have oxide, you don't really get much resist unless you wet it or you remove it. Right? Does that make sense? See, that's the importance of what I said about the demo. I'm going to show you little snippets to kind of trigger that. If you don't wet this with oxide, oxide is a pigment. It's going to dominate something. So things that you have that you're used to resisting, it will resist it, but it's also still going to sit on top unless you remove it. Okay? And I love that. I do. I love the fact that I can choose whether I want to leave it on there or take it off. I like the fact that I can kind of have this dreamy, creamy look down here, or this harsh dye look, or a little bit of both. Okay? And every time we add water, we're going to get that reaction. Let me just get this stuff off. And we'll dry the back. What do you do with the back of the tag? Nothing. It's just the back of the tag. Stick it down, yeah. Another question, right? They're like, can we seal it? Can we do all of that? Okay. Paper has no memory. Okay, just remember that, guys. It has no memory. So if it curls up, just flatten it. It doesn't know it's supposed to be curled. Okay? So there's our background. One of the things, again, if you're filming, just take a look at this versus this. That's really what I wanted to share in the mediums. Inks are always going to give you that watercolory, floaty look. Oxide sprays are going to give you that creamy look. When you combine them, you get the best of both worlds. You get that hazy look of an oxide, that translucent look of a dye. So my advice when you have any new medium is play with the additional ones. Even though we have oxide spray, ideally, as I've been using, I prefer to use them in conjunction with ink and not all on its own. Just because to me it just falls flat. Everything looks really, I don't know, kind of dull. It just looks a little dull, but and it's good to kind of give yourself permission to see what it looks like by itself, but also jump back and use some of those inks. All right, so we're gonna do one more thing, and then I'm gonna do alcohol ink, I promise. But I just need to do this because I want to. If it's in here, I have to get it out or forget it. All right? It's like every other maker. You have that idea, you have to just get it out. All right, I want to talk about some blending. What's that? There you go. Support. Get it out of there. You got this. All right. We're going to do a quick little stencil. So I'm going to use some sticky grid. Sticky grid is cool. It's just like, well, that's it. It's in a pack. Okay. It's 5 sheets of the most magical medium I've seen in the art world forever. I think it's awesome. It's just like a giant little creative sticky, right? So it's got this paper tab. You're going to peel off one side, it's sticky. You're going to peel off the other side, it's sticky. Now its purpose is that you put it on your cutting pad when you're die cutting, and you can position your dies, and they don't move. So unlike a magnetic pad that will move, my sister's here. Hello, my nephew. Hey guys. When you're working with a magnetic pad, those want to jump around, right? This is going to stick, so you can, if you have an alphabet die, you can spell it out. For me, as a mixed media maker, stenciler, stamper, magic. Whoop, because I can stick this down and stick it in my hand. I can put that down, and I can place down my substrate, and now this is not going to go anywhere.
And
Okay?
it won't rip your paper.
No, and you use it again and again and again and again. And these, I just get rid of them because I have just sticky good, like stuck to the wall, stuck to wherever. When you need it, you just peel it off and use it again, right? So now if I'm going to stencil, we'll go in and do some shifters. Let's take one of these guys. So we're gonna do a stencil shift. And I think for this, I will do a little bit of Oxide, and we'll probably even do some ink. Let me find a blending brush. Now we can work really, however you want to work with it, you can do that. I also need to find my roll of tape. Did you see that? Oh, there we go. Everything I need is in the drawers bin. Okay. So I like to make sure that my paper stays put. I'm a huge fan of stenciling with tape simply because I can create a hinge. So I always do it at the top. So the nice thing about this is that it's never going to impact my background. I was concerned that I didn't clean off my mat. Dang it, I didn't. That's all right. Didn't want to have to break out the alcohol this early, but I'm doing it. Yeah. Rubbing alcohol or hand sanitizer, you can hear that? Squeaky clean. So, although it may look clean, if something's not sticking, that means there's some sort of medium on it. So, break out the alcohol if you need to. Or vodka or gin or whatever. Okay, so when I'm working with this, masking tape, I'm just going to use a blending brush. Now these are unmarked. Thank you, Ranger. So by the end of the weekend, they will just be a party in a box, okay? This is a nice clean blending brush. Normally if you saw the video last year, I like to mark mine with color. You can use a Sharpie, you can use nail polish, paint, but if you have a brush dedicated to a color family, right? A red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, then you don't have to worry about cleaning them completely. The nice thing about this is we can use different colors and different mediums simply by cleaning this off on a baby wipe, okay? But I just think it's really nice if I have a dedicated brush. So let's start with the shifter. I think I'm going to go in with some rusty hinge, because it's here. Probably get another color. And you can do this with a blending tool, you can do this with a spray, whatever it is you want to do. But this one's nice because it's just going to allow me to kind of go in and move this around. Okay? Just put some color on there. I'm just going to create a fade. That's one of the things I like about these brushes. They just make you look like you know what you're doing. So if you're a blending tool challenged with that circular motion, hello Vicky, how are you? You get that really great soft gradation, like instant, okay? You don't have to worry about circle marks or anything like that. Now if I'm gonna clean this, again, a baby wipe. Or in this case, something that I think is a baby wipe. Because any water-based medium will clean off of your brush. And that's all I need to do to clean it. I don't have to rinse this completely, right? Don't put this under the tap to rinse it off. Just get off whatever medium's off the top. Nothing else on there. Pull this closed, and you're done. Let's talk about a shifter. A shifter is very cool because it is a stencil designed to shift to create a repeat pattern, okay? When you first get a shifter, and they have some hanging up on the other side, it's basically a stencil that has a cutout design and a laser etched design. Oh, I hear some.
Help you line it up.
Yeah. So that laser etched design is what's in the middle, okay? Now, I don't have the best eyesight when it comes to working with different mediums, so my hack for that is when I first get the stencil, I take black acrylic paint, I put paint over the top of my stencil, and I wipe it clean, because the paint will stick into those etch lines, and I use distress paint, so the paint is forever permanent. So now my stencil will always have those black lines in it on my shifters. So that's what I do to any of my shifters, because then I can see that outline. And it doesn't matter how much I put it in water or clean it off, that's just easy. But if you don't want to do that, you can have good eyesight, you can line up that little etched line, but it's a challenge, I'm not going to lie. They don't come like, they come etched, but they don't come printed. Stampers Anonymous, US company, so to have somebody sit there and try to match up that pattern and print it each time, it was just too, I mean, the stencil would have been $10. I'm like, I can put black paint on it one time. I can spend 10 minutes of my crafting life. After all, I'm a crafter. We have paint. It's kind of funny how many people, you know, are crafters that don't necessarily want to use what they have, but some are crafters, some are collectors. It's all right. Okay, let me take another brush.
Craft hoarders, huh?
That's right. Well, We're all guilty of that, are we
Yeah,
not?
we are.
Well, that's just how it is. So when we're working with this, again, blending tool, blending brush, whatever your weapon of choice is, completely fine. I'm going to go in with a contrasting color. I think I'm going to take a little bit of, let's go in with a couple of different blues into these ever so strong mini ink. They're really not that bad.
They're not bad.
All right, so I'm just going to pick up some color. Now, a blending brush is designed to blend. The nice thing to know about distress as well, you cannot contaminate a distress pad by double dipping. You can't. It may look a little weird, but you can't. The only way to contaminate this is to actually re-ink it the wrong color, or contaminate a dye into pigment. Meaning if I went into Oxide and then went into my distress and I brought pigment over, you would contaminate that ink pad. Like that pigment's never going to go away. So if you stick within your families, you can go in from color to color. That's really why we called it blending in the first place. That's why we had that blending tool, because distress didn't always have 60 colors. You know, we started out with 6 way back in the day, then we got another 6, and when we had 12, holy moly, we just thought we were rolling in it. But that's where we like, okay, we had a red, a yellow, a blue, okay, well, I need to make different shades of green. You literally dip into the different ink pads and blend new colors. Blending now has taken on a whole new meaning. When people hear blending, they think these little soft, airbrushy backgrounds, but that was never the intention of a blending tool. Blending tool was to blend your color, not necessarily your ink. Little trivia. Okay, so here's how we shift. So this is what we inked, right? To shift, you're simply going to take that stencil and you're going to move it to where that black line is now going to outline what you've inked. And you can shift it wherever you want. You can shift it high, low, left, right, doesn't really matter. You're just going to take that and shift it so that line is outlining what we just inked. Then you're going to take the tape that you just stuck all together.
It's not sticky.
It sticks when you want it to, right? This will be fine. I just like, I mean, you can use washi tape as well. I just want something that's just going to be disposable. But my tag has never moved.
Yeah.
Because it is sticky grid, never moved. And whether you, now the one thing I will say when it comes to sticky grid, I don't like to emboss on it. Because if you do heat it up, that adhesive will transfer. So if you're going to emboss something, peel it off. I mean, that's another thing. I don't know if you probably didn't because I didn't say it. But when I put this down, I line up the tag on my media mat. So I kind of squared it up on my lines. So if I were to pull it off to do something, I could stick it right back down into that area. That's just me. So now I'm just going to go in with another color. Just kind of blend that out. Change your colors, fade that out, intensify your colors. It's fun. When you have kind of freedom to blend, that permission, really nice. And the reason I chose 2 different mediums, again, for demo purposes, is just like I said at the beginning, I'm going to use stuff that in a perfect world you probably wouldn't have all of this stuff on the table. But I want you to see the difference when you're inking, because I know there's a lot of people that are always just starting out in the world of mixed media. What do I get? Do I get Distress Oxide? Do I get Distress Ink? What's the big difference? Well, these are dyes. So I'm just using dyes. This guy was a dye and pigment. So take a look at the color blend or the color intensity of that, okay? I'm just going to peel this up from the bottom.
And so you get both.
Yeah, so the nice thing about a dye is going to be a little softer than an oxide, right? That oxide is going to have that pigment quality. But the cool thing about a shifter is that it's allowing me to shift my pattern and use a totally different color to create a repeat pattern. Yeah, so that's what's cool. And another thing, if you paint it, you'll be able to see that pattern better. You'll see that, you know, when we do our plus signs, they're kind of jagged, or when we do the honeycomb, it has that zigzag, and there's a variety of shifters. But that's a cool background, really simple to do. One layer could have been embossed, right? If we wanted to stamp and emboss a layer, and then shift it and ink the other layer, or do 2 colors of embossing powders. I mean, yeah, sky's the limit. Sky's the limit when it comes to that. And then this is just going to peel off, and you're just going to put it somewhere until you need it again. I mean, that's it. Like, you don't have to try to line it back up on the paper. No, and if you're a stamper and you have a big background stamp, it's awesome that I can take my cardstock, stick it in my thing, and yeah, I mean, this silly little bag is like, it's a total game changer for when it comes to crafting. It's so, so simple.
This is the spray that you I saw you in the video doing.
The oxide spray.
Yes.
This is a spray stain, yeah, that's it's very cool. So just some interesting things when it comes to dealing with different mediums, and now we get into alcohol ink. I promised we would go there. All right, that's good. Yeah, isn't that pretty? Simple, simple, simple blend. All right, let me clean this. I'll put this in my water.
On your chair.
Thank you. My towel almost went in my water. Thank you. Clean this up. Although I'm kind of chaotic in the process, I'm a pretty tidy maker, I'm not going to lie. All right, I'm going to keep that right there. Thanks. It's the simple things. And I'm sure there's got to be baby wipes and paper towels somewhere, because I asked for them. Just probably don't know where. All right. Good. Is the garbage still there? I just want to throw it in your backpack. Thank you. I've been known to do that too, where I'm just like, see, that's it, yeah. I just take it and I just throw it in there like, thank you. I'm like, oh, that was meant for the trash. Okay.
There you go.
All right.
That's a cool thought.
So let's talk about working with alcohol inks. When it comes to working with alcohol ink, really the important thing to remember is they are a solvent-based medium designed to work within their own world. And even though we love mixed media and doing all these crazy things, if you try to start taking things like distress and all that and mixing it together, the results are not going to be the same because you impact how this product bonds onto the surface, right? So everything else that's water-based, our ink pads, our sprays, our stains, those can all be mix and match. But when it comes to alcohol ink, that's it. I go to that and I do nothing else with it. But we have some new product now in that world that allow us to create some really cool effects. I'm going to get rid of these just for the weekend. Put these in here because I'm not going through that again. There we go. Okay, well, something happened. You're welcome. Yeah. I know, right? Now you can just exhale. I don't know. For me, I can just feel like, I'm good. All right. So when I'm working with alcohol ink, especially on the media mat, this guy, this craft mat, I want to get rid of. The reason is because alcohol ink will stain this. No other medium will stain this. It's a silicone back, so nothing's going to hurt this. If you don't mind having an ugly mat, if I really showed you what my mat looks like at home, not the one in the video, the real one, it's a whole lot of color because it doesn't impact its function at all, right? To me, it's just more trouble to peel this off and remember where I put it, you know, to get it. So I personally leave it there, but if you want to keep this nice, peel it off for alcohol ink, and then you have just a glass surface to work on. This is